A very good morning and welcome to Business Live here on Sky News, a special edition looking at the impact of inflation from a Wetherspoons in Harrogates. A surprise jump in UK inflation with plane fares and food and drink driving the biggest price rise in 10 months. We'll get reaction from the nation's most outspoken publican, Sir Tim Martin, about inflation and the looming tax rises for businesses.
We're talking about 1.2 million for Wetherspoon a week. Yes, it's a lot, and it's more for pubs and hospitality than for supermarkets.
Yeah, very good morning and welcome to Harrogate. This is Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey. We're live at the Winter Gardens, one of the, I expect to say, jewels in the crown of the 800 Wetherspoons pubs there are around the UK. It's pretty busy here this morning. Lots of people have been getting their breakfast, people now turning up for lunch, a couple even having some pre-midday pints or glasses of wine. And I've been talking to the pub chain's founder and chairman, Sir Tim Martin, about today's inflation figures, plus the general state of the economy. And I've been putting to some of your questions to him, from how he manages to keep his prices down. Is it because the beer's about to go off? Or why he won't allow dogs in his pubs? We'll have more on that in a moment, but first, let's jump to that surprise inflation figure this morning. This is what the CPI rate came in at. It's up 3%, or at 3% in January, according to the Office for National Statistics. It was 2.5% in December, and higher than most economists had forecast. That also means that inflation is at its highest level in 10 months. A reminder, of course, that the Bank of England's target is at 2%. So what's driving all of this? Well, according to the ONS, food and non-alcoholic drink inflation rose from 2% in December to 3.3% in January. Services, which the Bank of England pays attention to, rose sharply to 5%. That was up from 4.4%. Education saw a big rise from 5% to 7.5%. That's because, of course, the government scrapped the VAT exemption on private school fees. And core inflation, which is the CPI minus food, energy, alcohol and tobacco, well, it was also up 3.7% in January from 3.2% in December. Well, delighted to go through some of these numbers. We've got Danny Hewson, Head of Financial Analyst at AJ Bell. Very good morning to you.
Morning.
First of all, this is in many ways not good news, is it? You know, we are seeing inflation ticking up again.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody who has to go and do the weekly shop will have noticed that the price reductions that they might usually have expected to see in their shopping baskets in January just weren't there. And some of the staples have even been ticking up a bit, which makes things incredibly uncomfortable, because remember, although wages have been outpacing inflation recently on average, not for everybody, a lot of people are still feeling the hangover from when inflation hit double digits. So even though we're at 3%, and that's not that far off the Bank of England's 2% target, for a lot of people, this is going to feel very difficult indeed.
It is, and you know, I've been talking this morning about the price of eggs. Now, it's gone up 20% this year. That is a hell of a rise. Now, it's been driven by this awful avian flu that's seen millions of birds being slaughtered. But it is a reminder that lots of different things, whether it's the war in Ukraine, whether it's a possible Trump tariff, whether it's avian flu, lots of things bleed into inflation, don't they? And that's why, in many ways, it's quite difficult to control.
It is incredibly difficult to control. When you think about one of the things in a lot of people's food baskets, which just went absolutely through the roof in the last couple of years, olive oil. You know, that was down to the fact that we had bad harvests and it just got incredibly expensive. People then started to trade down. And I think that's what a lot of people here in Wetherspoons are talking about. They're talking about trying to find value wherever they can. So they're looking at discounters in terms of supermarkets, and they're also thinking about rising energy bills as well, because all of that adds to household costs. So if they don't have to put the heating on at home, it's a really cold day today, if they can come here, spend 3-4 hours nursing a cup of coffee, that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, really interesting. We've seen some of that this morning here. Danny, what does this mean for the wider economy in terms of stagflation's been mentioned a lot today, interest rates may not come down quite as quickly. What are you looking out for as we go into this year?
We saw an immediate reaction in terms of market expectations of where interest rates are likely to go over the coming year. I think it's less that we're not expecting to see cuts. Market's still pricing in 2 cuts to the base rate, but it's more about when they will happen. So we're not likely to see a cut at the next meeting. Potentially, we might get a 0.25% cut in May. Now, we've just had a decision from the Bank of England where a couple of members of the MPC actually wanted to deliver a 0.5 percentage point cut then. So it just demonstrates the volatility that we're facing at the moment. And as you say, you know, factors like Trump tariffs, they could make a huge impact to the way inflation looks. But I think the big test is going to be April. We know, according to research from the CIPD, that a lot of businesses are planning to push costs onto the consumer because of those changes to national insurance. With all the other increasing costs that we're likely to face, we know that water costs are going up. You know, people are going to be struggling.
Danny, for the time being, thank you very much indeed. And Danny is going to be with us throughout the day here on Business Live with her analysis of those inflation figures. And you talk to people here about why they've come to Wetherspoons, and they say it's because of largely the thing that prices are going up. That is why they decided to come and have their breakfast here, for example, rather than other places that might be more expensive. And I've been talking to the founder and chairman of Wetherspoons this morning, Sir Tim Martin, and I was getting his reaction, first of all, to today's inflation figures.
Well, having been trading for over 40 years, we've had a lot of it, and pretty high in the 80s, very high in the 80s, down a bit in the 90s, and then we had a quiet period, and then we've had trouble recently. So I think one of the main things about inflation is no one predicts it very well. So interest rates have started going down because inflation's going down, and then it starts going back up. So I just hope it isn't too high like everyone else.
But you're quite good at absorbing costs.
We in a way we have to be. If you're running a business, you have to try and be good at absorbing costs. So I will take your compliment.
Well, I mean that in the sense that, so inflation is going to tick up this year. Everyone expects that. But taxes are going to go up too, aren't they?
By a heck of a lot. Much more than inflation for us is the level of tax.
How much are we talking about?
We're talking about 1.2 million for Wetherspoon a week.
A week?
Yes, it's a lot, and it's more for pubs and hospitality than for supermarkets because we've got more labour costs per pint.
And does that also include the national wage, the minimum wage that's going to go up as well?
Yes.
So what does that mean then? Does that mean that you look at opening fewer pubs? Does it mean fewer employees? Does it mean some people might have to lose their jobs?
No one's going to lose their job at Wetherspoon, but I suppose it makes you circumspect about what you're going to open in the future as a matter of common sense, because you're trying to calculate, can we still make a profit? I think when you get high taxes, it impacts most on small towns, I would say, because they're the ones with the lower levels of sales and that lower numbers of people about. So I think in the pub and restaurant industry, it'll be the smaller towns that'll be under more pressure.
Can you see prices going up for beer, for breakfast? In the sense, Wetherspoons is famous for, you know, being value for money, but if everything's going up on cost, customers are going to have to pay a bit of that, aren't they?
I think we're speaking almost not of Wetherspoon, because we'll try and do our calculations and have prices as low as we can. But overall, prices are certain to rise by the 1st of April. I think when the taxes kick in, there will definitely be an increase and an increase in inflation as a result of the tax increases.
In the past, you've been quite quite complimentary about Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor.
Have I? Oh, right.
Well, I mean, as in, in economists and that sort of stuff. I mean, what do you think, more than 6 months in, of how she's performing? Or of the decisions she's made, I should say?
Where I think modern politicians across the parties are at fault is they don't understand and have a natural feel for the importance of free enterprise. The reason North America is much stronger than South America, or South Korea is much stronger than North Korea economically, is because of free enterprise. And for 40 years, politicians in my career understood that. I think the last 10 years or so, they've forgotten and thought really business is a milk cow run by people who only care about themselves. So it's quite a difference in the perception of businesses, whereas we're here in Harrogate, we want people in Harrogate, young people, old people, to start their own businesses, employ a few people, earn a bit of tax for the economy.
Does that mean kind of, disappointment with Labour? Labour came in saying we're going to be very pro-business. Does this feel like a pro-business government to you?
I think they understand they have to be pro-business. They were a little bit arrogant to start with, and they realise now that some of the moves they've made have got counterintuitive consequences. You put taxes up a lot, you got inflation and so on. So I think they're learning on the job. I always say, although politicians are incredibly annoying, if you believe in democracy, which we do, you're going to have them, and they won't all be J.K. Galbraith in economics. So I'm hoping they learn from their mistakes.
Let's talk about the pub. You've been in this business for decades, but you're facing something you've probably never faced before, which is the next generation of drinkers aren't drinking. Young people are not drinking. That's not good for business, is it?
Well, I'm always slightly wary of these presumptions, which sometimes are urban myths, which aren't true. So I haven't come across too many of these abstemious, religious...
Well, I mean, I have. I think it genuinely is a trend, as in, and some stats do bear this out.
There are some stats.
Yeah. Does that mean the business has to change? I mean, you are a pub, but you can do other stuff, can't you?
Yeah, well, 20 years ago, I walked by a Starbucks in central London. They hadn't been long in the country, and it was fuller than our pub, so I thought we've got to start selling coffee. And then we started selling breakfast. I think we're now the fourth biggest coffee company in the UK. And I read in a newspaper the other day, we're fifth biggest for breakfast, so it does change. And heck, when we started trading, we were 5% food, and now it's, by the end of Thursday, it's about 50%. So it's things change.
Food is the future more than drink.
Well,
maybe.
I wouldn't go quite so far as that, but it's a big part of a big pub like this one.
I have to bring up the B word, Brexit. We're 5 years on. We left 5 years ago. I mean, you donated, I think, 200 grand to Leave campaign. Do you regret that now?
What I say is, you're not going to change anyone's mind at this stage. But since Brexit, since the referendum, we've created 1.3 million jobs, the lowest unemployment we've ever had, half the level of France. We've outgrown 2 of the 3 major EU economies, and it's total chaos. But somehow democracy works, and free markets.
So essentially, no regrets is the bottom line.
Well, I regret we didn't adopt in certain areas more sensible policies. I regret that today. As to whether I would like to have a system where the president is unelected, which is true of the EU, MEPs can't initiate legislation, and a court, which isn't responsible to any democratic institution, that was the basis for my decision. That hasn't changed, so I don't regret it at all. Je ne regrette rien, moi.
Do you think we should be using more of our Brexit freedoms, though? Are you frustrated?
Yeah, I'll tell you, one of the things was we were going to become a free trade nation. Now, here's the daftest thing you've ever heard. We import bananas from around the world. They get weighed at Dover or some other port by British people, and we, the public, pay a tariff, which is another word for a tax, on bananas. When I last looked, even in Harrogate, we weren't growing many bananas. So that's the sort of thing we could eliminate to the benefit of...
I assume then you're not a fan of Donald Trump. You talked about North America. He's someone who loves tariffs.
Well, I never pick on people who've got nuclear weapons. It's one of my main principles in life. But I do think with regard to politics in America, for example, that it's up to the Americans to decide. They had a hell of a decision and a hell of a debate, and they had to have Donald or Kamala, and they went for Donald. So far be it from me to criticise him.
Just talking about politics here, though, because, you know, it does matter who's in charge of the country. What's your impression of the new Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch?
Believe it or not, I haven't sort of micro-analysed her or any of the other leaders, really. I've tried to, apart from Brexit and opposing the euro, I've tried to stay out of party politics if I can.
Are you an admirer of Farage, though, for example, given, you know, you kind of essentially campaign for Leave together?
Well, people ask me about Farage, and I say, I quote Ken Clarke, who was a Remainer and Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he said Farage is the most important politician in the last, in Ken's career. So he's a very important politician, amazing speechmaker, clever guy, but do I agree with everything he says? Possibly not.
Just two final business questions, if you can. One of the reasons people will suggest that you're so cheap is because you kind of squeeze suppliers. You're like the big supermarkets of the pub world, that people don't get a good deal. Is that fair?
I don't think it's fair, no. I mean, people wouldn't trade with us for a long time if we were unfair. So we deal with more microbrewers than any other company. We deal with, you know, hundreds of small brewers. We've been dealing with Green King and Heineken and Carlsberg for 45 years, Guinness for 45 years. So I don't really think it stacks up. If people look at our margins, they're half or a third of some of our main competitors over the years. So we got quite big pubs, we sell at quite low prices, and we earn a buck just about.
Okay, and just very finally, on yourself, you've been doing this for a long time. We're all not getting any younger. Any sign of retirement?
I've just been talking to the guys in the kitchen here, and some of them have been working for 10 or 15 years for the company. And I say, I win again. I've been working for 45 years. Do you think, guys, I can do another 45? And they said, you can do it, Tim. So I'm with them. So I'll retire at 115. I'll be the oldest man in the world.
So no sign of retiring yet?
No, okay. I hope not.
There you go, so Tim Martin speaking to me a little bit earlier, and the reason we've come to Wetherspoons is because it's not just simply a pub for lots of people. This is, I think, the 5th largest distributor of coffee in this country. It's the 4th largest place where people come for breakfast. And the reason we've come to Harrogate, people have been asking me, why are you here? Well, to be fair, we asked Wetherspoons where would be a good place to do this interview. They seem to think that this is the nicest Wetherspoons in the country. I'm going to step out a shot just to show you how nice it is. And to be fair, it is pretty damn nice. We're going to take a quick break. Coming up next, a little bit more from Tim Martin. We're going to put in your question, to him, and we'll have further analysis of this morning's inflation figures live from Yorkshire. Stay tuned to Business Live on Sky News.
In the last 5 years, more than 13,000 farmers have left agriculture in the UK.
Is it going to be viable for the future?
No farmers, no food! The frustration, the anger, the fact that so many of them are at risk of going bust has now become too much.
You've got to keep hope because one day it's going to be okay.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent.
It's scary what's happening in the country.
It's the illegal migrants that we don't want here.
How difficult is this to police tonight? Off the scale. Having the police speak to us so starkly right in the middle of the riot showed just how serious the situation was.
The
water on board the barge contaminated with Legionella bacteria, an outbreak that was first revealed by Sky News. There have been questions for months over whether the support offered to asylum seekers on the bivvy is sufficient.
A cruel place to put human beings.
From busy cities to rural communities, we spend every day reporting on how big decisions impact real people. The last smoke and steam rises into the sky above Blast Furnace 4.
Today is a day in history for Talbot.
The closure means more than 2,000 job losses.
It just seems madness.
It is a highly contagious infection. South West Water did apologise again.
This is the Revenge Porn Helpline.
They're helping terrified victims.
You've been a victim of a very common type of online crime known as sextortion.
We're making things better for people.
Stonehenge became the latest victim of Just Stop Oil.
Now I can say I've been to the orange Stonehenge.
Sky News, get the full story first, free, wherever you get your news.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Slay minutes, slay better. Flying nerds, fly better. Thank you.
Very welcome back to Business Live here on Sky News from the Winter Gardens in Harrogate, a Wetherspoon's pub. Of course, this used to be a spa town. This is part of the Winter Gardens where people would come and relax as they were having a spa way back in the 19th and 20th century. But it is now a Wetherspoon's, and you've been sending questions to us here at Sky News about what you want to find out from Sir Tim Martin, about his business, the decisions he's made, particularly when it comes to dogs. Let's have a listen to some of those questions and answers from the founder of Wetherspoons.
No, that's an urban myth. As you can imagine, with 800 pubs, I couldn't hang outside the beer brewers' gates trying to get the price down. So it's because we sell a lot and have been doing for years, and our margins are low.
What about music? Why do you hate music so much?
I love music actually, but it's quite divisive. And in the first pub we had music, and I'd go to the loo and come back and the Stranglers would be playing at top volume. So I thought in the end, a lot of people, you don't need music and they can choose their own when they go home, as I do myself.
A lot of people have emailed in, WhatsApped in, they want to know, why can't they bring their dog in to the pub?
At pub number one, I had a dog, a very nice Doberman Pinscher, but he was frightened of other dogs and barked like hell whenever another dog came in. So also a divisive issue. Some people like him in big pubs like ours, lots of children at half term, like at the moment. Doesn't work very well.
Is it true that you named the pub Wetherspoons because it was after a teacher who said you'd never do well?
It's a 50% distortion, 50% true. It was a teacher who couldn't control the class. Nice man, couldn't control the class. And in the first pub, I couldn't control the customers or the staff. No one did what I say, so I sympathise with the teacher.
Two final questions. Do you want to see more migrants? Do you think we need more workers in this country?
Oh, bowling me a fast political ball there. I think that there's always been an element of migration, and in general it's a good thing, but not illegal migration. I think it has to be lawful, and to be realistic, it has to be people who have the qualifications that the country needs.
And finally, what is one of the most famous publicans in the country's favourite tipple?
I hate to discriminate, but I drink Aberdale from Green King in Bury St Edmunds, the nectar of the gods.
There you go, Tim Martin denying the reason the beer is so cheap in Wetherspoons is because it's about to go out of date. Let's bring in Danny Hewson from AJ Bell, who's still with us today. I think it is interesting, isn't it? You talk to a lot of people who come here, and they come here, and it's not just here, it's the supermarkets they decide to shop in, or the places they go on holiday, and the main driver of that is the cost, is how much it costs them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why so many people who are looking to go on holiday are going for those all-inclusives so that they can budget. People are really wary about what they experience during the cost of living crisis. And I think that's why when we talk about inflation now, people are really interested because they understand how it affects their lives. Before, you know, people would talk about inflation, it would go in one ear and out the other. Now you understand the real world effect of this increase. And I must stress, at 3%, we're nowhere near the 11% that we got to. And a lot of people are really nervous that the track that we're on might take us back to those days. Doesn't look like anything like that.
And just very finally on that, you know, I've spoken to a lot of businesses, as have you, over the last 6 months or so. Their frustration is on this idea about tax, that they're going to be clobbered this year at a time in which the government's wanting growth. And isn't that the frustration, I think, from business?
It is a massive frustration from business, just at the point where they were thinking, OK, let's invest, let's create jobs. They've been hit by what is effectively a tax on jobs. So now they're having to rethink those plans, maybe roll back on the number of people that they wanted to employ. Certainly they're thinking twice about the kind of pay rises that they can give to people. So it is something which is incredibly frustrating for business, and that does impact economic growth. And on the flip side, it is likely to impact inflation as well, as many of those price costs are going to be passed on to the consumer.
OK, Danny, as always, thank you very much indeed for your time. And you're going to come and join us again at 4:30. Thank you. That's Danny Hewson there from AJ Bell. Well, that is it from me for the moment. We'll, of course, be back this afternoon in Harrogate at 4:30 for another special edition of Business Live, and we'll have continuing coverage throughout the day here on Sky News of those inflation figures live from Wetherspoon. But later we'll be talking to local businesses here in Harrogate about how they're going to cope with those tax increases we're talking about and rising inflation too. So do join me at 4:30 this afternoon. But for now, in Wetherspoons, in Harrogate, goodbye.